Hey, guess who finally got around to finishing Mob Psycho Season 2? So my buddy Best Guy Ever made a good video about the central theme of planting seeds through deeds of kindness, which pervades the second season of Mob Psycho 100. And he gives the due praise to all the action animation and stuff, so go watch that video if you want a more general take on the show. What I want to touch on is one of the bits which he didn't really talk about, and an episode which seems to have been fairly divisive with the audience, that being my personal favorite, Episode 5. In this episode, Mob is trapped inside a fake universe created by an enemy psychic in which none of the kindness or support he'd experienced throughout his life had ever existed. He is aggressively treated like shit rather than merely ignored, and never experiences a moment of levity. This is the psychic, Mogami's, attempt at convincing Mob that if he'd never had the privileges of being surrounded by good people who helped him to learn about himself and gave him something to stand for, he never would have become a good person, and might ultimately have turned against society. If I had to guess what about this episode might have disappointed viewers, and did feel a little strange to me at first, it's that Mob doesn't really prove him wrong at all. The only reason that he ends up remembering who he really is and fighting back is that those friends he's made are able to reach him. But this isn't a flaw in the storytelling, it's exactly the point. The crux of this episode is when Mob responds to the opponent's jeering by admitting that yes, he has been incredibly lucky and probably would be resentful and evil if he'd experienced the life which this person did. But since he has had the incredible privilege of being surrounded by good people and knowing what it means to be a good person, he has no excuse to act like he didn't. This episode resonated with me a lot as someone who, like Mob, had experienced a lot of social confusion, anxiety, and ignorance growing up, and could easily have become a very dark person, having harbored no shortage of resentment towards people who bullied me over the years. But also like him, I was lucky enough to have a few of the right people looking out for me, and tried to focus on their influence and the positive aspects of my life in order to maintain the inner strength needed to find confidence in order to live my life. In my early teens, I used to spend a bulk of my time hanging out in anime forums, and even though I didn't really fit in among those communities any better than I did in offline ones, some of the people I spoke to made me feel a lot luckier than I could have known about my life. Talking to people whose parents would abuse or berate them over their sexuality, or even just their interest in anime, or kids who lived in small towns where even having rumors spread about them liking cartoons could mean getting shunned or having their asses kicked, made me feel like just simply getting ignored by most of my peers was fine by comparison. My parents were always accepting of my interests and decisions and are even supportive of this career. This career! If you haven't seen much of my After Dark content, or in particular my Language Politics is Marketing Not Morals video, you might not know that I have a very strong disdain for the victim mentality. It's not even that I don't think people deserve to feel bad about themselves or upset at the world for having wronged them. Society has wronged all of us horribly, whether we even appreciate the damage it's done or not. It's just that this mentality will never do anything for you. You will never be able to cry the world into caring about you or guilt your way into reparation. Yes, a lot of people start off from a higher platform than others, but the only way you'll ever get to the same place they're at is by working as hard as you can and taking it with your own hands. No matter how far down you are, the only way up is by climbing, and the longer you spend wallowing in the depths, the more time you'll have wasted that you could have spent improving yourself. Anyone who believes themselves to have been more wronged than someone else will be able to say to them that they can't possibly understand the struggle that I've been through. There is no retort for this argument, and there doesn't need to be. Mob completely acknowledges the reality that for all the troubles he's faced, his life probably straight up was not that bad compared to how it can be for other people. But with that privilege checked, he concludes that this is even more reason not to waste the amazing opportunities he's been given, and to work even harder to be better so that he can help to lift people up who are even more damaged than himself. I totally forgot to mention in the script for this video that the animation in this episode is some of my favorite that I have ever seen. Just how expressive it is, how it communicates this overwhelming amount of power by sort of shattering the entire semblance of reality. That it's so wispy and artsy. It doesn't look like anything other than an abstract idea of emotion and power. It's sort of, you know, it's basically an abstract piece of art in animation, most comparable to maybe something like 1001 Nights by The guy who did the Final Fantasy art, whose name is slipping my mind. Anyway, back to the video. The hardest wall to climb is the wall of emotional damage. No amount of preaching is going to convince someone that they need to change if it didn't work the first time. The best you can do is to try and cure their ignorance. If you can at least show people the ways that they could help themselves, then there might be a chance. No one who has access to the internet or who is able to even watch Mob Psycho 100 or a YouTube video about it is in a position so bad that there's no way to dig themselves out. But that doesn't mean it's in any way easy or that they should be expected to just pick themselves up and do it without any help from anyone. If you have the strength and the knowledge that you can help someone else along the way to your own self-betterment and work together, you'll most likely benefit one another with your knowledge and make the world itself that much better in turn. That is, if you want to be a hero like Mob. Personally, I just find most people kind of annoying and don't want to deal with shit. I'll save my personal guidance for when I have kids. The rest of y'all can become patrons and hug it out in my Discord while I take your money to buy more beer. Oh, God. Oh, I couldn't hold it for 45 seconds. I'm sorry.